I grew up in a pastor's home, so we were at church at least 3 times a week. And my parents were incredible role models for us kids. I have a brother and a sister. There was never any instability or any, fighting, anything, abnormal. We just had a really great upbringing, great parents. I had a really good connection with my dad. We did a lot of outdoor stuff together. So, was really, really just a great upbringing.
And then I grew up in more of I don't necessarily want to say unstable environment, but I guess if you call it what it is, it's more of an unstable environment. I grew up moving around. My dad was in oil and gas, so he would leave for months at a time. And my parents they stayed married, but they were always unstable. We'd move in with my grandma sometimes. We'd just move around and it would just be kind of up and down and all over the place. With my dad traveling, there'd be months where I didn't see him or speak to him, and my mom would take on the sole responsibility of raising us. My parents definitely fought more openly and drank quite a bit, but all that said, I knew that they loved me and they did the best they could for me and my brother.
That's good.
It's sticking.
So that's not
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. That's great.
I don't want to make them feel like...
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you did good.
No, it was good. Okay, second question. How did your family of origin affect you as an adult, both positive and negative?
As an adult, I really, I was just so blessed to have a great example of what a godly marriage was, that I don't have a whole lot of negative perceptions of marriage from my upbringing. I think the only thing for me is just, and it may be more of a personality thing, is that just, being in church from such a young age, there was good and there was evil. There was, it was black and white. There was wrong and right. And so I never really lived life, in the gray. It was just this or that. And so I think as an adult, that shaped my reality a lot. We were either married or we weren't. We had a good marriage or we didn't. And so, in my mind, we had a great marriage. But I really didn't have anything from my parents or from their example that negatively impacted me, I don't think, as an adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. For my upbringing, I would say as an adult, it taught me how to deal with difficult people, how to be more adaptable, but also how to have more grace and maybe tolerance for people who may be going through something or, in a difficult situation. I think when you grow up with parents who are alcoholics, you tend to want to help people more and step into situations where maybe you might not need to, where you should take a backseat more. But I think there were pros and cons, but definitely I can see both ways how it taught me some good things, but then it also taught me some bad habits. We met at a Bible study that Life Church did way back in the day called Day 3. It was like a citywide college Bible study, and we saw each other there. I wanted to meet him. He was cute. And so we had mutual friends, so we kind of met through that Bible study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually dating another girl at the time. I was there with her, and our mutual friend came up to me and said, "Hey, someone wants to meet you." And I was like, "Okay, is it a dude or a girl or what?" It was a super pretty girl, so I was pleasantly surprised. She said about 2 words, so it was like, "Hi, I'm Kristi." That was about it. But so that's how we met.
I feel like our dating relationship was really good. It was quick, to the point, I guess. Nothing.
We kind of skipped past dating.
Yeah, I would say so. We dated maybe a year and got engaged and were married, 6 months later or a year later?
A year later,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And so it was quick. And would you say it was a healthy dating relationship? Or
No, I think there were some things obviously we could have done better, but I think overall it was probably a pretty good dating relationship. You know, spiritually, we had boundaries, but you know, like other dating couples, sometimes we pushed the limits a little bit. But I think overall it was a good dating relationship.
I was 19 and Adam was
21.
21, and so we got married when I was 20, so pretty young. And you were 22 when you got
22.
married.
Yeah.
The first years, I think we kind of differ on perspective in our first years. Hindsight, I can look back and see more of his perspective. But the first years, Adam ended up getting a job as a worship pastor in a different city. And so we moved to a different city, Stillwater. And meanwhile, I was in nursing school up here in Edmond. So, you know, we moved down there, but yet he stayed down there and kind of had his friends down there. And I stayed up here and stayed with some of my girlfriends and went to nursing school and got a job up here. And so there was, in my mind, some separation as far as, you know, he did his own thing, I did my own thing. And so in a way, it didn't feel like maybe a first year was designed to go. I mean, it was the first year that we created for ourselves, but we did the best we could being young. But there was definitely some things looking back that were detrimental to starting out a relationship.
Yeah, I kind of felt like, okay, we're married. You know, this is it. We're having a good time. I'm working a lot. She's in school. So yeah, we saw each other, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a week, maybe, you know, lived in under the same roof for a couple days out of the week. But yeah, the majority of it, we were in 2 different places. And so looking back on it now, I see that wasn't healthy, that it didn't really allow us to form just, you know, a really deep, intimate bond. Mm-hmm. It was more of kind of almost a partnership, really. Mm-hmm. You know, here's what I'm responsible for. Here's what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And then we'll meet up when we can. Yeah. So it became less of a relationship. It was more of a partnership, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And then there was also, starting out, some views. Adam was really great with money and like money management. He got into Dave Ramsey early on in our marriage. And so he was big into this futuristic goal of, you know, financial freedom and having everything paid for. And I grew up a little more spoiled than he did. And so I think immaturity on my part left me more frustrated with his financial decisions that he made. Like, for instance, I had a new car when we got married with a car payment. But, you know, him being the provider of our family thought it was best to go ahead and not have any debt, which I agree with now. But at 20 years old, looking back, I was a little immature when it came to that. So there were some things that we didn't necessarily agree on and weren't on the same page that I think caused quite a bit of a rift in the beginning. And I know all marriages start out and you have to kind of blend 2 people into one vision and kind of work towards that goal. But I don't feel like we had the tools to kind of blend that vision and work in a healthy direction towards those goals. I feel like it was more, I had something in mind, he had something in mind. He went ahead and sold my car without me knowing, you know, and I didn't have the maturity to get on board with that.
My advice to young husbands would be, go ahead and get buy-in and input from your spouse before making large decisions like selling your wife's car. You know, I instead of valuing her input and bringing her into the decision, I just thought, well, hey, this is what's best for us. Let's just do this. Yeah. And she'll be great with it. And, you know, the error that I made was her dad had bought that car for her before we'd gotten married. So it was in a way, in her mind, it was a gift from her dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we go, we get married, and big big provider husband comes in and is like, nope, I'm selling it.
Yeah.
We're getting rid of it. And here you go. Here's your little Honda Accord with the loud exhaust.
Yeah.
And because it's
Definitely.
paid for, it's cash, here you go. And so, yeah, looking back on it, definitely should have been more consideration and input from her on that.
Well, and I think too, back to our upbringings, like that's how I interpreted love from my dad. He was gone quite a bit, but every time he came back, like I was showered with gifts and spoiled. And so I feel like gifts and nice things were from my dad, and like how I felt loved. So in a way, I felt unloved, but wasn't able to communicate that to Adam in a healthy way. And then another example would be, we moved to Stillwater, and a friend of ours had let us move into basically a shack. It was a 1900s
built at the turn of the century, 1900s farmhouse with a tin metal roof,
infested with ladybugs.
Yeah, there was ladybugs all over the place in the fall or the spring.
No heating or air.
But it was free.
So in Adam's mind, it was free. Once again, more towards the direction of debt-free and financial freedom. And then I looked at that and just saw the worst possible scenario. And so, that kind of led to him staying in Stillwater more, and me just staying with girlfriends up in Edmond while I went to nursing school. So once again, more of a detachment from each other. Mm-hmm. We were at a place where we had 3 kids. We were moving and found ourselves in a busy season of life. And it was one of those things where I kind of attached more to my friends and started putting my friends ahead of my spiritual life, ahead of my family. I spent a lot of time with one girlfriend, and she might not have been in the best place in her marriage, and things were kind of chaotic in my marriage. So it kind of turned into more of like us being able to relate in the sense that we both had, she was struggling in her marriage. So then I thought, well, maybe I'm struggling in my marriage. And, you kind of go down this road. Well, yeah, maybe things aren't right with me and Adam. Maybe things aren't going in the direction I want them to go. And, you just kind of I kind of put my husband and family on the back burner, and definitely spiritually just kind of detached and stopped doing my quiet time, spending time with the Lord and really seeking Him.
So we were in the middle of a move. So there was some, just some general stress from moving. But work was good. I felt like our marriage was in a good place. I could tell there was some kind of a weird underlying issue, but it didn't seem too big at the time. We would try to talk about it, and I think it would always kind of come out as, well, I just don't really have the words to describe how I feel, and I would always try to dig into it and see, is it me? Is there something going on spiritually, or something else going on? And there just wasn't ever a real clear picture of what was going on. But I think, now looking back, it was just an absence from really seeking the Lord. Mm-hmm. It was I think a departing from really, daily walking with God. And whenever you do that, I think our enemy can take little things and twist them in your mind and manipulate and make you think that your marriage isn't what it is. Can kind of almost lead you to a place where you're discontented in your marriage, and where you start finding faults and issues in your spouse. Mm-hmm. And then that leads to, well, maybe the grass is greener over there.
Yeah, it's like one little thought after another kind of leads you to a place where you are just totally discontent with where you are, and you don't even realize it's happening over time, but it's little shifts and little ways of thinking in your mind that can take you way down a rabbit hole that you didn't want to be on. It was like little ways of thinking, little steps, kind of looking over here and not looking at my family, not looking to Christ, not looking to anything else, but, just being like having my blinders on in a way. It's almost like a spiritual fog. Like you block out God, you block out all the voices of reason in your life. The girlfriends that had been closest to me, I shut out and kind of focused on one friend in one direction. And I think, like Adam had said, we have like the Bible says, really, we have a spiritual enemy that watches you, and he prowls around like a lion waiting for someone to devour. And, he knows your vulnerabilities. And so, he could probably see my discontent and my detachment from Christ, and really capitalizes on that. So it was more, one baby step at a time, one compromise at a time. And then, someone comes in and maybe gives you a compliment, and, that maybe leaves you feeling a little more flattered than you should be. But yet Adam and I'm not in a healthy spot to where I can tell Adam about it or be transparent about it. And once again, I feel like that is kind of a coping mechanism I had from a young age, is not being able to be very transparent with Adam, or, just bring things because I feel like I'm going to get in trouble. I know I'm not doing anything wrong. I can handle it. If I bring this up, it's going to stir up trouble. So I've got this, I don't need to bring it up. So I think over time, and that can be really detrimental. So anyways, a compliment that maybe leaves you more flattered, and then maybe it's a phone call that I don't disclose to Adam after that, and that just opens up the door for more things. You kind of like the attention, and then before you know it, you're full on into some scenario that you don't want to be in or never thought you would be in. But then at the same time, there's parts of you that are flattered by the whole thing. We've talked about this quite a bit, and it stems from growing up. I was able to really compartmentalize things. I think when you grow up in a dysfunctional home, especially with alcoholic parents, you can kind of see the best in people, but then you can kind of shut out situations and turn things on and off in your mind. So as things were going on, 99% of it was behind a screen through texting, emails, phone calls. So it almost didn't feel real as you were going through it. Like as soon as I put my phone down, I could turn it off, put it out of sight, out of mind, and go on with our family like nothing was wrong. So I think that was I know that was an unhealthy coping mechanism, and something that I definitely had to work through. And also, like, it honestly didn't feel real. And I think that, especially in today's day and age with screens and all of that, you can hide behind a screen and not really show your true colors to anybody, but it's flattering in a way. It's like a game, but then yet you can turn it off. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So other thoughts during that time were, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to bring it to Adam because I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. That was hard for me to be transparent and go to Adam with a problem, even though he had never given me a reason to not be able to go to him, just from the habits of childhood that I carried over into our marriage. Not rocking the boat was easier for me than actually presenting a problem that we'd have to work together. It was easier for me just to deal with it myself, not say anything, and not let on that anything was wrong.
So I found out that there was an affair going on about 4 months into it. I was doing some work and her email was accessible. So I, opened up the email. At that time, I'd felt like there was a slight gap or a slight divide between us. So, I was curious. And right off the bat, I saw an email and, my heart kind of just sank. And so I took a couple minutes, while my heart was racing, and my mind was trying to go through all the possible what ifs, what do we do from here? I tried to take a couple minutes and just breathe and sit still and pray and, gather my senses, because it was just a wave. There was a wave of emotion. And so I think I called her and I just said, hey, I found this, what's going on? And, there wasn't a lot of response. It was just kind of like, okay. There was a little bit of deflection. I think it was kind of like, well, we're just talking, and I won't talk anymore. We won't talk anymore. So I knew that wasn't quite accurate. I felt that in my spirit, but at the time I just didn't want to, I guess, escalate it anymore. I kind of already knew what I needed to know.
The phone call from Adam definitely was, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. You kind of conceal things for so long that when you're called out in it, it just seems unbelievable. So I think there was a period of like lying to protect. So I definitely didn't come clean, or it wasn't forthright about everything. Everything had to be pulled out painfully for everybody involved over time. So I think at first I was more numb to the fact and tried to, put up a wall, not deal with it, deflect, like you said, lie about it. We even had some amazing friends that came down, like in the middle of the night, like my very best friends that I'd kind of pushed aside for a while. They came down and, sat with us in our living room, and I was like numb to the whole thing, just kind of shut off to myself. So it took me a minute. I wasn't like found out immediately. I had a repentful heart or anything like repentant heart. I didn't have an immediate repentant heart in the beginning. I feel like I was almost stone cold in the beginning. Mm-hmm. It seems so unbelievable. But I think, when I have a mentor and a good friend, and she had mentioned that it's not whether you confess or you're found out that's an indicator of where your heart is. It's kind of what you do at that point when things are brought to the light, whether it be through you confessing it or being found out. It's what you do with it at that point. And so I think once I was faced with the reality of, oh my goodness, I am losing everything. I got an apartment, we split the kids. And so realizing the devastation, not only that I caused Adam, but also my kids and the other family involved, that was eye-opening. But more than that, like the pain that it caused Christ to see me, break my vows to him and to walk completely in the opposite direction of his will for my life was eye-opening. But it took my heart a minute to be mm-hmm. softened towards those things. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there was one specific instance where I felt like my heart softened. It was just, I feel like a combination of everything, mm-hmm. being alone with God, being alone with my thoughts, to kind of reflect on it all and to kind of face it, not displace it, to kind of face the devastation, because I had been so used to deflecting and compartmentalizing, pushing it aside. And so being in an apartment alone and with my Bible and my thoughts were probably the thing that was the most eye-opening and awakening to really bring me to my knees and bring me, I guess, to the end of myself. Other fears that I had would be like having to provide for my 3 kids. That was a huge burden to take on. I've been so used to having things joint. We both work towards providing for our family. I had the fear of like, okay, these are my kids. I have to kind of relearn how to, or learn, I guess, how to run a household by myself and build a budget by myself. And how am I going to feed these kids? How am I going to pay for their school? How am I going to let them continue their activities where they've already had a massive disruption in their life with their parents moving in separate directions, those sort of things. Just like life skills that, when you get married at 20, you've always done it with somebody else. So then here you are in your 30s having to figure it out.
Yeah. So initially I thought, this is just a really, unfortunate thing. But I'm not okay with a marriage continuing like this. So my initial thought was, there's just kind of no hope for our marriage. So I, arranged for her to get an apartment. I moved her out. We split up accounts, and my temptation was just to finalize it, put a stamp on it, say it's done, it's over, as heartbreaking as that was. But there was kind of just this little voice, and I feel like it was the Holy Spirit just saying, just wait. I think a lot of times there's the temptation to make permanent decisions based on temporary circumstances. When emotions are really high, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of conflict. It's really difficult to make a clear decision. And especially when, your kids' futures and everyone else is in the balance. I really felt like God wanted me to just wait. And I kind of remember in one of my quiet times him telling me, Adam, yeah, you can humanly, you can go and end this marriage. But who are you to decide whether or not I can take this mess and use it for my glory? And that really, put a check in my spirit to just wait and continue praying and seeking. And in that process, I kept asking the Lord, God, show me if you're working in her life. Help me to see little ways where, she's really repentant, that this isn't just a I'm sorry I was caught type of thing, but show me how you're renewing her and her heart and her mind. And over time, I was warming up to the idea that, maybe God really can take this devastation and bring about new life and something, even more exciting than what was there before.
I reached out to someone at church who I knew had gone through a similar circumstance, and wrote a book about it and was openly transparent about it. So I reached out to this lady, and she was actually the one whose husband had an affair, and she was his spouse. So I reached out to her, and she welcomed me with open arms, was non-judgmental, and pulled me close, which is so endearing, especially when, you think you're doing you have friends walk away, you feel so unloving, and like what you did was completely unloving and doesn't warrant someone being open or warm to you. So that meant a lot, and her wisdom, oh my goodness, was huge, through walking. First of all, her wisdom as far as how to get me back on the right track with Christ. That was her first goal. Her goal for me wasn't to fix my marriage or anything like that. She knew if I didn't get A right, then B and C wasn't going to follow. So she was huge, and God literally took care of every step along the way. He put so many people planted along the way, and out of left field, he provided these people to speak wisdom, truth, insight into my life. And he also allowed people to walk out of my life that didn't need to be walking through this scenario with me at the time, that wasn't going to be beneficial. And so God really took care of every detail. And of course, through Adam, and watching his response to me was such a picture of how Christ lavishes grace on us, and just to feel Christ's love through how Adam responded to me when he could have been horrible to me. He wasn't, and I know that's only because of Christ that he was able to respond that way as well. And we got a really good counselor recommendation along the way, which was huge. A huge part of our restoration. Wouldn't be here without our counselor, Dr. Kim, and his wisdom and leading for our marriage.
I had two or three really good buddies that spiritually are just, rock solid, that came down and I was able to, bounce things off of and just say, what should I do here? What do you think about this? And their advice was always first to, pursue Christ and make sure that, I was being humble, because, I think a lot of times when something like this happens, it's kind of easy. And I think you can kind of become susceptible to, well, I didn't do anything wrong. And, you can almost become not prideful, but just you place yourself at a higher position, and you really shouldn't. Christ, wants us to humble ourselves. So they really pushed me, hey, humble yourself before God, listen to him and his voice. And I think that really helped me to hear the Spirit leading me just to wait, not to make any rash decisions about our marriage. And then that allowed me also to just really empathize with what Kristi was going through, because, while she did what she did, and it hurt me and it hurt our marriage, it hurt the heart of God, it helped me to see what she was going through as, my sister in Christ. And there was a part of me that was really, I ached for the pain that she was going through, because I knew she was alone. I knew that she felt tremendous guilt and held a bunch of weight on her for what she had done. And that kind of hurt me for her. So I really felt like those guys coming alongside me, it was a lifesaver.
How I left things, once I feel like the fog had lifted, I got into my own place. It was easy just to cut everything off, with the right perspective on being focused on Christ. It was easy just to leave it, shut it down, change emails, change phone numbers, and try to make steps to go ahead and just cut it off where it was. So it wasn't necessarily hard. I think when you realize the trail of devastation that was caused, it wasn't hard to just turn from it and turn the other direction. Yeah, there were definite times where he showed up at my work, but at that point, I'd finally gotten my head on straight, and I was able to call Adam, whereas in the past I wouldn't have been able to be transparent about things. I was able to call Adam and say, hey, he showed up at the hospital. I called security as well. Those sort of things did happen along the way, but I felt like God had brought me to a place where I never wanted to go back to a scenario like that. That's not what I wanted for my life. That's not what Christ wanted for my life. I wanted to be married to Adam. I wanted to pursue our family and move forward in that direction. So anything other than that was easy just to cut off, turn, and bring it to Adam. I was able, with the help of my friends, to see where I had gotten off track and the things that had been detrimental in my marriage prior to that. And so knowing that, hey, maybe in the past I wouldn't have been able to bring a problem to Adam, and Adam and I could work on it together or find a solution together. Now I was able to say, okay, hey, he showed up here at the hospital, help me with this, instead of me being like, oh, I have this. I can deal with this by myself.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any emotional attachment to that person?
No, I feel like, when you're in it, it really was so behind the screen, so it just wasn't reality. So a friendship, sure, we were all friends in the beginning, but when you're faced with something like this and the devastation, it was real easy for me to turn off. And I don't know, too, growing up and with the background that I have and being able to compartmentalize and moving around and being able to shut off relationships. You move and you never talk to these people again and never talk to those people again. And just that was a track record throughout my life just because of the situation I was in, moving around with my dad in oil and gas. So people walking in and out of my life has kind of been a common theme. So it wasn't that hard to shut it down. I think I did miss the wife. I missed her friendship in the beginning, and I felt really bad for the pain I caused her. I loved her as a friend, and I was attached to her. I think I struggled a lot with guilt and just everything that transpired in her life as well. So that was hard. That was harder than the actual affair itself, was the friendship that was lost. I know it was unhealthy. I can see how our friendship had gotten to a place that was unhealthy in the sense that we relied more on each other and really were kind of like codependent on each other in a way. We did everything together, her and I. So that was a change and something that I had to work through, and that God just gave me a peace about over time.
Good. I think that's really good. So Adam, what helped you get to the point where you thought your marriage might be salvaged?
The first couple weeks, there was an effort on my part to really try to get to the bottom of, okay, well, what's the extent of the affair? And the first few weeks after were really rough. And so, again, I allowed time, and I allowed just room, I think, for God to move in his timing. And it really took, I think probably 6 to 8 weeks, a couple months before God started to show me parts of her that I felt like were new, that were different than before. She was extremely willing to, hey, let's put a tracker on my phone, or hey, you can, put software on the computer. You can see every email that will go out from now on. And so that helped, incredible transparency from her, which wasn't present in our marriage before that. That was a huge change for me that I saw, that I was like, okay, well, if she's really willing to go to this extent to show me that she wants to be married to me, then I'm gonna stick around for a while and see what happens. So that really started to gain my confidence a little more. Trust was still broken, and when you break trust, it takes a long time to rebuild it. But those were the first few couple little building blocks that helped me, I think, see that, okay, there's hope.
One of the hardest things during that time was our oldest child was in second grade. So talking to him about us having to separate and live in different places was devastating. That was one of the most heartbreaking conversations we had to have. Our middle child at the time, she was in kindergarten. And so she was more just didn't want me to leave her, and a little more clingy to me. And then the baby was 2, I believe. And so she it was hard to be, she only wanted me and didn't want to be away. So there were so many different dynamics that we were dealing with, family-wise, and just, having our own separate places and still trying to figure out how, we had to interact because of the kids and trying to manage that. Whereas, I'm sure I'm the last person he wanted to see at the time. And, it was devastating to have to walk in and see him hurting, and, how that I know that I caused that. So that was hard. There was just a lot, and talking to his family about it, it wasn't a very private event we went through. I would say it was, friends knew about it. It was, people gossiped about it. It it was hard. Definitely was hard as far as like friendships too, people walking away, people whispering about you, talking about you. You're already like so grieved by yourself and your actions that it wasn't helpful. People sharing what had happened as a prayer request or, as juicy, it was more juicy gossip for people. So that was kind of hard to navigate. Adam's parents, they were definitely distant. Like I got taken off all the family text messages, and that was really hard. Like you know how annoying family text messages can be, but when you're taken off of them, you kind of learn to appreciate them after that. But I mean, they all handled it in the best, most Christ-like way they could. Adam's side of the family. It definitely wasn't just between him and I. It was, your sin can affect a lot more people than just you and your spouse. I mean, not only does it grieve God and your spouse, but my gosh, it can break other people's hearts and leave other people in the wake of your devastation as well.
So, after a couple months go by and I really start seeing the Lord working in Kristi's life and working in my life, you just felt a strong sense that, God is a God of second chances, of many chances, and that we're called to forgive as we've been forgiven. And so that was a really key thing for me, is that as much as I humanly struggled with, gosh, how can I forgive this? How can I move past it? I kept being confronted with, how many times do I break the heart of God? And God, continually accepts me back. And so I finally just said, God, give me the strength to have that mindset, to have that willpower, to push through my human emotions and the way that my mind works, and have your kind of love. And so we decided, okay, let's just take a trip, the two of us, and let's just try to have fun. We're not promising anything. We're not really gonna make it official or whatever. Let's just take a trip and see what happens and have a good time. So we ended up going skiing, and it was on that trip where I said, hey, what would you think about moving back in? Mm-hmm. And I think that was maybe one of our best dinners that we've had. So I think people around us thought that we were getting engaged or something like that, because there was hugging and crying and stuff like that. But at that point, we'd really felt God just inject so much of his love back into our relationship that we couldn't really contain ourselves.
I mean, I feel like from day one, I wanted it, day one, from when the fog had lifted and, I kind of moved out and was faced with the reality of everything, that I wanted things to work out between Adam and I. I knew I loved him, that I wanted to be with him. I wanted to work on our marriage. So I guess that would be my turning point, was kind of when I was off by myself with time to think and focus. And that just kind of led me to turn away from all of the junk that I had been involved in. The shame and condemnation was so hard to deal with. I think that was after I knew that Adam and I were going to be okay, and we were going to work towards renewing our marriage. There was so much shame and condemnation. And I think that it wasn't Adam heaping it on me. It was definitely like, you feel grieved by what you've done. That was really hard. I was just mad at myself. And hindsight is 20/20. So you can connect all the dots and see where you went wrong when you're standing on the other side looking back at everything. So just being mad at myself, and just knowing if I could have just made one little change, or just brought something to Adam, or brought something to one of my close girlfriends who would have gladly talked to me about it, or, really spent time in God's word, praying about God's direction. You see how things could have gone different. But I think, with so shame comes from that, knowing, gosh, I was so stupid to not have seen this coming, not to be able to stand up against temptation, not to be so naive. And, you know, when people are talking about you or whispering about you, and, you know, that kind of puts you back into, oh my gosh, I am horrible. I am the result of what I've caused. I am, you know, just unforgivable. You feel all of those things, but, you know, the best way to overcome any obstacle is really just to dive into scripture and to like recite those things as in your head, recite your verses in your head. You know, there were times when I had to go back up to my kids' school, and, you know, both families had kids at the same school, and just knowing that people knew what happened. And so there would be times I would be walking into school just reciting scripture to myself, just to be able to walk back into like that hallway and be able to, you know, hold my head up high and know that, you know, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, that I have been forgiven. As far as the east is from the west, God separates our sins. And, you know, just remembering those things and believing them. And I think over time, you know, you can say it, but over time, as you say it, you start to believe it. And there was a book by Kristi called Unashamed that was really great for me. I've like highlighted the whole book. So reading that and just reminders, and surrounding myself with people who like believed in us, believed, you know, the best is yet to come, that Christ can make things new. Christ can redeem every situation, and redeem doesn't mean just make it back to how it was. It means make better than new. Believing those things and having people cheering you on along the sidelines, and you know, just so much wisdom and wealth from the people God put in our lives was totally helpful in knowing and believing that God has forgiven me. So it really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or their opinion was of me at the time or now.
I think for the first few months was definitely the most key. Both of us humbling ourselves and seeking the Lord with everything that we had. After we got back on, you know, somewhat solid footing, we were back under one roof. Our kids started to settle back into some normalcy. Things really, you know, I think progressed a little bit. There were times though that, you know, the enemy doesn't want to see a marriage that was on the brink of destruction come back, and for sure doesn't want to see God use something like that. So there were attacks in the months following, you know, that we'd have random phone calls in the middle of the night, and someone would be just, you know, it was almost like a demon was on the other end of the phone, and it would be accusing and saying all kinds of just evil things. And we never knew who the person was. They blocked the number. And, you know, we'd hang up the phone and look at each other, and it'd be 2:00 in the morning. It's like, what do you do with that? Mm-hmm. So there were multiple attempts, I feel like, from our enemy, our spiritual enemy, to drag us back into it. Mm-hmm. And for me, I really, you know, had to take the advice from our counselor and from buddies. Just, hey, try not to see these shadow thoughts. These are things from you know, from the darkness, from evil, that are trying to pull you back into what happened. And you know, God has moved you into something greater, and to look ahead and not to look back. So I feel like those first few months, and then 6 to 9 months, somewhere in there, we really started to kind of turn a corner, and restoration was definitely, you know, present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with all of that. Knowing Adam for as long as I've known him, I know when he makes a decision, he's a man of his word. He sticks to it. So I felt confident when he asked me to move back in with him that he meant it. It was from God, and he had wisdom behind that. There were a few tough times when we had tough conversations, or he would be angry or frustrated. That was really hard for me not to like just retreat and kind of pull myself into a shell and not open up. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that too stems from childhood. You know, you just like any type of conflict really just shuts me down. So really kind of pushing into that and being able to be open, but yet received with warmth and grace was helpful. I would say the first year was, rebuilding trust, getting myself on the right track. Dr. Kim had told me to, it's to be thankful that we are in today's day and age where we can use technology as our advantage, in the sense that regaining trust, like putting trackers on things, or FaceTiming Adam when I went to work and when I left work, or just little things like that, was probably rebuilding in year one. And, having a lot of long conversations about everything, it was definitely more of an emotional year. I would say year two was more of, okay, we've kind of established a baseline of where we're going. Things are normalizing. So year two, I feel like, was when we were able to, we were still healing, but yet we were able to see, we were able to talk to some people, I think, who had gone through similar situations. And there's a verse in Revelations that says we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And I think there's healing when you're able to share your story with somebody else and kind of lend a hand up to help other people going through something similar. That was a little more healing, I think, for us.
Yeah.
And now we're several years down the road, and we're able to sit here and talk about it and not cry or be frustrated or angry. And I wish I could have done things a different way. I'm grateful for what God has brought out of it.
I think too, another thing we tried to do probably in year two was just establish some new things that we had never done before, because, we were really in a season of growth. And so for that reason, we tried to, go on different vacations, or just do stuff that we had never really done before, go on date nights, go ice skating. We'd never gone ice skating before, stuff like that. So that was some really good advice we'd gotten, is try to establish some new things to build what God is doing in your new marriage. And that'll really create kind of a new sense, for each of you and for your marriage. No, it really was just, God working in my life, and showing me the multiple times that I, screwed up, and, even in a day, how many times I fall short. It was really hard for me to stick on, okay, well, I'm going to hang this over her head. At some point, you just have to either believe what God says in His Word about forgiving other people. And, in essence, I'd be calling Jesus and what He did on the cross a liar if I didn't believe that the power of Christ was powerful enough to overcome this situation and this sin. So I was really confronted with the fact that I don't want to call God a liar. So I'm just going to trust in the power of Christ and what He can do. And, that really got me to a place where I had to just say, okay, I'm just going to sit back and watch and see if the fruit of her life moving forward is what I want to see. And over time, sure enough, God allowed me to see those things. I don't feel like there was any shame for me. I think the most difficult parts for me was just being, a man, a husband. I really dealt with anger and some really deep underlying anger. There, obviously initially when you find out, there's lots of ways that you want to let that anger express itself, and all of them are not healthy. And so, I tended to kind of bottle some of it up since I couldn't express it or do what I wanted to do with it. And even to this day, I think that I really have to be careful, because anger from years ago can still pop up even now in just everyday life. And so it's still a process, still working through giving that to God, giving all those emotions and things that I felt at that time to God, and truly being healed by it. So those were the toughest things for me. Yeah, that there was definitely a time where it was a really, really sensitive subject, was our sex life moving forward, because it was really hard to be back on the same page as husband and wife without that aspect of our relationship. But I really felt like once the Lord worked in me and that I was to a place where I was willing to forgive her, I kind of just had to say, I'm either willing to forgive everything and let's move forward, or I'm just going to stay stuck in the past. So, I really just felt like, hey, let's just make this official. Mm-hmm. And so God was able to just, through his working, allow us to have kind of a, I wouldn't say normal physical relationship back again, but I mean, it was pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And I think honestly, that was one of the best things that helped us heal.
Well,
let's just be honest.
And I don't feel like I struggled in any means with the physical side of things. Do you feel like I did?
If you did, I couldn't tell.
No, so it wasn't hard for me at all. I think our marriage is great. I mean, I don't ever want to be prideful and say, oh, we have a perfect marriage and stick my head in the sand, because nobody's marriage is perfect. But I would say our marriage is better than what it ever has been in the mm-hmm. past. There's definitely more transparency and openness, and I feel connected to him more so than I ever had before. Mm-hmm. There's a deeper level of trust on my part, knowing I can trust him with the good, the bad, the ugly. And he's already seen the worst possible side. So him just accepting me for what I am has really done a lot for me as far as confidence and stability, and him being a leader and leading us to Christ and leading us in that direction. I feel like that just even makes my respect for him even more. So that's been huge.
Yeah, I mean, I would say no marriage is ever perfect, but ours is, I think, just under that. Mm-hmm. And obviously we're still working on things and figuring things out about each other. But I think for me, over the past few years and going through what we've gone through, you start to empathize and appreciate what, your spouse's upbringing has to do with the person that they are. You learn each other's strengths and weaknesses, and you kind of know when to maybe back off and just, there's personality differences in every marriage. So some of those things you're never going to be able to fully escape, but you just, mm-hmm. you learn how to, you learn how to try to be graceful and compliment each other. So mm-hmm. yeah, I feel like our marriage today is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are you working on in your marriage today?
I think there's always a process of being forgiving, and just with like little things, not even like the big events in life, but just, little annoyances along the way, being, like you said, forgiving of those and knowing how to navigate those and compliment each other in spite of those. So mm-hmm. those sort of things.
Yeah, I think we're doing a fairly good job of date nights. We love going out. Recommendation. We love going out to dinner, and at least, I don't know, if not weekly, every couple weeks for sure. Mm-hmm. I think that's super important because it gives us time to talk, communicate, dream together, mm-hmm. Just have fun. I think that's one of the things that a lot of marriages lack is just, when you're dating, there's all these, dreams and fun and, mm-hmm. So there still needs to be that, mm-hmm. The longer you're married. And so I can't think of anybody else that I'd want to go hit the slopes with or go eat some good food with.
There is definitely nothing positive or beneficial that can come spiritually, emotionally, in any relationship you have from that. It's just going to lead to a path of devastation and just reek of devastation. So run, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, I would say for sure before any permanent decisions are made, to step back, take some time. It never really hurts anybody to take a little extra time, especially if there are kids involved, and just see and ask God, what God can do through the situation. Sometimes a wife may not truly repent, may not be willing to be completely transparent. And I think if that's the case, you have to continue praying and seeking God. And then, at some point, hopefully God will, open your eyes as to what the next step is. But my advice would be wait, seek godly counsel, get wisdom from people who have solid marriages, get a solid Christian counselor. It's tough because there's the financial part of that, and when you're in the middle of something like that, it's sometimes it's hard, especially if you're a penny pincher, but it's worth every penny. You really have to see it as it's an investment in your marriage. So that would be my recommendation. Wait, pause, pray, seek godly counsel, and then if you start seeing signs that her heart is changing and that she's repenting and that she's being truly transparent, then that's when you press in, lean in, and see what God can do.
That's good. Last questions for both of you. One thing God taught you during this time.
Gosh, so much, but one thing. I mean, you never know what somebody's going through, or why they're going through a situation, and each situation is unique. So just, I guess grace through it all. I mean, I feel like the underlying theme through everything is God's grace for you is more than you could have even imagined, even in your worst moment.
Mm-hmm. I think I would say, let's see. Tell me the question again.
What's one thing that God taught you during this time?
That God can work in impossible situations. That He can, cause dry bones to come to life. That He can, plant gardens where there was once desert. There's with God and the power of Christ, anything is possible. So no relationship's too far gone. There's never a scenario where there's no hope. If Christ is at the center of your marriage and your relationship moving forward, then he can create something incredible when at the time it seems like it's not possible.